Welcome back to another chapter of Betty Boop. Today we're reading chapter 10. Alright, chapter 10. I think I have you bookmarked. Ah, yes. Chapter 10. The Queen's Plan. At last, the wicked queen thought of a plan. She painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler woman, so that no one would have known her. In this disguise, she went across the forest until she came to the house of the 7 little dwarfs, and she knocked at the door and cried,
"Fine wares to sell, fine wares to sell."
Snow White peeped out of the window and cried,
"Good day, good woman, what have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares,"
answered she.
"Laces of all colors."
And she held up a little bodice that was woven of variegated silk.
"I need not be afraid of letting in this good woman,"
thought Snow White. Bimbo thought otherwise, and he growled in protest. But the girl laughed at him and unbarred the door and bought the pretty lace.
"What a figure you have, child,"
said the old woman.
"Come, and let me lace you properly and prettily for once."
Snow White, suspecting nothing, stood before her and let her lace up the pretty bodice. But the woman laced so quick and tight that it took Snow White's breath away, and she fell down as though she was dead.
"Now you have done with being the fairest,"
said the old woman as she hastened away. Bimbo licked his mistress's face and tried to revive her, but when he could not, he dashed out of the house and through the forest into the mountains. And finally, down into the black tunnel where he knew the dwarfs were working. He twisted and turned in the darkness and thought for a long time that he was lost, and sat down and howled dismally. After a while, he saw twinkling lights in the distance, and the little men ran up and gathered about him.
"An old woman has killed Snow White,"
panted Bimbo.
"Come home at once."
Then they all ran madly out of the mine, and when they reached home, they were terrified to see their dear Snow White lying on the ground without life or motion. They raised her up, and when they saw how tightly she was laced, they cut the cords in two. Then she began to draw breath, and little by little, she returned to life. When the dwarfs heard all that had happened, they said,
"The old peddler woman was no other than the wicked queen. You must beware of letting anyone in when we are not here."
And when the wicked woman got home, she went to her glass and said,
"Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all?"
And it answered as before,
"Queen,
thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair. When she heard that, she was so struck with surprise that she fell down in a fit, for she knew that Snow White must still be living. But now, said she, when she had recovered,
I will think of something that will be her ruin.
and by witchcraft she made a poisoned comb. Then she dressed herself up to look like another sort of old woman. So she went through the forest until she came to the house of the 7 dwarfs, and knocked at the door and cried, as all peddler women do,
Good wares to sell, good wares to sell.
Snow White looked out and said,
Go away, I must not let anybody in. But you're not forbidden to look.
said the old woman, taking out the poisoned comb and holding it up, so that the jewels with which it was studded sparkled in the sunlight. It pleased the poor child so much that she was tempted to open the door. But Bimbo wrung his paws and cried,
She means no good.
Nonsense.
laughed Snow White.
What harm can a pretty comb do me?
And when the bargain was made, the old woman said, Now, for once, your hair shall be properly combed. Poor Snow White, thinking no harm, let the old woman do as she would. But no sooner was the comb put in her hair than the poison began to work, and the girl fell down senseless. Now, you paragon of beauty, said the wicked woman, this is the end of you. And she started off. But Bimbo leaped at her like a crazy dog and would have killed her then and there, except that she struck him so hard with her magic stick that he also fell down, as though he were dead. By good luck, it was near evening, and the 7 little dwarfs came home. When they saw Snow White lying on the ground as if dead, they thought at once that it was the stepmother's doing, and looked about until they found the poisoned comb. And no sooner had they drawn it out of her hair than Snow White came to herself and related all that had passed. But as for poor Bimbo, although he got better, he was so weak he could hardly bark. Then the dwarfs warned Snow White once more to be on her guard and never again to let anyone in at the door. And the queen went home and stood before the looking-glass and said, Who is the fairest of us all? And the looking-glass answered as before, Queen, thou art of beauty rare, but Snow White living in the glen with the 7 little men is 1,000 times more fair. When she heard the mirror speak thus, she trembled and shook with anger and almost had a stroke. Snow White shall die, cried she, though it should cost me my own life. And then she went to a secret, lonely chamber where no one was likely to come, and there she made a poisonous apple. It was beautiful to look upon, being white with red cheeks, so that anyone Who should see it must long for it. But whoever ate even a little bit of it must die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and clothed herself like a young peasant woman and went across the forests to where the 7 dwarfs lived. And when she knocked at the door, Snow White left off tending to poor Bimbo and put her head out of the window to see who was there. Then she said,
I dare not let anybody in. The 7 dwarfs told me not to. All right, answered the woman. I can easily get rid of my apples elsewhere. Here, I will give you one. No, answered Snow White. I dare not take anything. Oh, are you afraid of poison? Asked the woman. Look here, I will cut the apple in 2 pieces. You shall have the red side. I will have the white one. For the apple was so cunningly made that all the poison was in the rosy half of it. Snow White longed for the beautiful apple. And as she saw the peasant woman eating a piece of it, she could no longer refrain, but stretched out her hand and took the poisoned half. But no sooner had she taken a morsel of it into her mouth than she fell to the earth as if she were dead. And the queen, casting on her a terrible glance, laughed aloud and cried, As white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony. This time the dwarfs will not be able to bring you to life again. And she went home and asked the looking glass, Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of us all? This time, at last, it answered, You are the fairest now of all. Then her envious heart had peace, as much as an envious heart can have. Looks like Snow White might be dead. That's the end of chapter 10. Won't you join me next time for chapter 11, The Coffin of Glass. I think this might be the last chapter. Yes, the final chapter, 11. That's the end. We'll see you next time.
Magic mirror in my hand, who's the fairest in the land?
You're the fairest in the land. You're the fairest in the land.